Hello to those of you joining us via live stream. I am Aisha Yandoro, the co-founder of the Guaranteed Income Community of Practice, and I am looking forward to this conversation between Natalie Foster, Sukhi and Mayor Biss. It's blissful. I want to keep calling him Bliss.
Hello.
So the video we just watched was such a milestone. We have hit 100 pilots across this country. Now, there was a great New York Times piece on this fact last Friday. Make sure to check it out if you haven't. So much of your work is reflected in these pilots. About half are mayor-led in the vein of the Stockton demonstration, and about half are community-led in the vein of the Magnolia Mothers Trust. Put together, there are 100 of them. And you have to raise a lot of money. You have to figure out how to disperse the cash. You have to think about the legal risk and the waivers. And it's an incredible amount of work that has been replicated 100 times across this country. And I am just so grateful to get to be in the presence of so many of these pilots. And as that video pointed out, put together between all the different pilots, there are 38,000 people around this country who are receiving, have received, or will receive monthly cash payments with no strings attached. Have largely caught on because they've been effective and responsive to what people need. We need stability, freedom, and a chance to envision a better life. But you don't have to take my word for it. I get to be up here with Sukhi, the Executive Director of Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, and Mayor Daniel Biss of Evanston, Illinois, to talk about some exciting new data.
So thank you, Natalie. Before we go over the data that we're sharing today, I actually want to take us back to Stockton, where we announced and where we had the first mayor-led pilot and also had the first community data dashboard coming from a guaranteed income pilot. My journey to guaranteed income and our journey in Stockton was incredibly personal. So I'm brought to guaranteed income by my mom, who when I was growing up was working multiple jobs. She was a cashier at a gas station. She also worked at Subway, and she was a house cleaner. In her free time, she was a caretaker for my disabled dad and my 3 sisters. And my 2 sisters and I. And no matter how hard she was working, we were still relying on government assistance and on programs like food stamps and Medi-Cal, not because she was working hard, she wasn't working hard, but because she was working hard and it still wasn't enough. And in Stockton, we knew that while my mom's story was tragic, and it's not an anomaly, and for far too many women, especially women of color and Black women, it's a reality that we grapple with every single day. And we also know that poverty is a policy choice and one that we can disrupt with a guaranteed income. So with that in mind, and also knowing that while I know that poverty is a policy choice, and you all know this, most in this nation haven't come to grapple with that fact. And so to change the narrative, we had to couple data and stories together. And to do that, we launched a community data dashboard in Stockton. And now, today, we're excited to share one that shows the data from more than 24 mayor-led pilots, created in partnership with the Center for Guaranteed Income Research and the Stanford Basic Income Lab. And it shows, again, what we saw in Stockton, that when you invest in folks, they're going to spend the money to get ahead and to take care of themselves and their families. And with that, I'll pass it over to Mayor Biss.
Thank you very much. My name is Daniel Biss. I'm the mayor of Evanston, Illinois, a city just north of Chicago, to which all of you should move. We are incredibly proud. Somebody clapped. That was great. Thank you. I'm incredibly proud that we are launching a guaranteed income pilot. Checks will be out the door in a matter of weeks to 150 families in Evanston in need of that money. And I'm honestly honored and excited to be a part of this gathering and this conversation and to hear the inspiring stories and ideas that I'm hearing. But I'm also a little bit aggravated by the message that I have to deliver this morning, which somehow feels very antiquated. The idea behind guaranteed income is that people living in poverty who are in need of money can have their problems best solved by being given money. And this is not an idea that we are debating 15 minutes after the invention of money. It's an idea that we're debating right here in good old September of 2022. And it's so out of step with how we think about money in all other contexts. When we just give it to the people who need it. When the economy is slow and we want to increase investment, we lower interest rates and stimulate investment all over the place, not just by putting money in the hands of the investors who have filled out certain government paperwork and met certain complex thresholds. When the pandemic devastated the airline industry, we just shoveled money toward airline companies. We didn't invent a complicated process during which a few of them had to somehow qualify themselves. And yet, as soon as you are living in poverty and someone suggests that perhaps your problems can be solved, your problems of not having enough money can be solved by being given some, questions arise. And we hear these questions in Evanston as well. Questions of, well, hold on, if we do this, what are these folks going to do with this money that you're going to give them? And that is why it is so critical that Mayors for Guaranteed Income is now launching this data dashboard, which includes data from 20 pilots from across this country with information about what has been done with the money, and by the way, who has received it. So first, a few statistics about who has received it. The recipients are 77% women, 41% African American, 33% of mixed descent, 25% Latino, 16% white. The average recipient has an income of $14,226, just slightly in excess of the, one might argue, very low federal poverty line. And the median recipient has a lower income of $11,292. These recipients are people who need this support. But perhaps even more responsive to the criticisms and the questions and the skepticisms is the data about what this money is being spent on. 39% going to retail or discount establishments to purchase clothes, food, hygiene products, and so forth. 27% to groceries. 9% to transportation. 7% to housing and utilities. I'm guessing it does not come as a surprise to anybody in this room, but it needs to be said because unfortunately it does come to a surprise to too many people outside of this room. This money is not being squandered. It's not being squandered on any of the kind of ugly, vicious, and often racist and sexist stereotypes about what poor people will do when given money with no strings attached. It's also not being squandered on something else, though, right? Which is yachts and vacation homes, expensive art at auctions. Because I find this whole world of skepticism about what are poor people going to do with the money we don't trust them to be very baffling in light of what rich people do with their money. Are you kidding me? And so I want to end on one point, even zooming out a little bit, if you'll indulge me. Because I think it's worth asking ourselves the question of where this ugly skepticism comes from. And yes, a big piece of it just comes from straight up old-fashioned racism. And a big piece of it comes from straight up old-fashioned sexism. That is a fact. But I think there's even yet more to it than that. And there's something very deep and profound and dangerous in that additional step, which is that way too often in this country, we make the assumption that rich people are rich because they made good choices, and poor people are poor because they made bad choices, and therefore we ought to expect that rich people will keep on making good choices and poor people will keep on making bad choices, and that is so profoundly opposite to the lived experience of people in this room and to common sense and to almost every anecdote we encounter in our daily lives. And that piece of poison does not only act as a barrier, making it harder for us to implement guaranteed income programs, it breaks our ability to make sound, logical, evidence-based, and humane public policy in domain after domain after domain. And so my one charge to y'all is go out in the world and identify that pathology and break it wherever you find it. And the more we break that pathology, the more we'll be able to build the kind of just world that we all are fighting so hard for. And with that, I want to hand it back over to Natalie.
Thank you so much, Sukhi and Mayor Biss, for encouraging us to root out the poison. We have come so far when it comes to the 100 pilots we've talked about today, the 100 mayors announced today, and also the fact that there are many states who have passed policy. We've come far in translating the vision and the values of a guaranteed income into real policy shifts. And policy is where it makes a difference in people's lives. Policy is frozen power, and it means that it will continue on until something changes, but it's something that people can count on for perhaps a lifetime. That is what we are shooting for. We have passed a modernized child tax credit in 2021, which effectively operated as a guaranteed income for kids. And just last year, we marked significant wins in 7 states that made existing policies on the books look more like a guaranteed income. Monthly cash, no strings attached. In my home state of California, any other Californians in the room? That meant taking a policy called the Young Child Tax Credit and effectively turning it into a guaranteed income for families with kids by getting rid of the requirement that one must collect a paycheck in order to receive the tax credit. That change meant putting $1,000 into the pockets of more than 100,000 families with kids in California. And in Illinois, a lot of love for Illinois. The groups on the ground and the lawmakers there took a state earned income tax credit, an anemic earned income tax credit that had been sitting around, and drastically expanded it to include any worker over 18 and undocumented immigrants like dreamers. And they made it way bigger, too. So we're just getting started. States are really the laboratories for innovation, where we have the opportunity to continue to demonstrate the proof of this concept that with a guaranteed income, it's more than just a check. It is time to spend with your family. It is time to build new skills for a better job, or it's dollars to spend at your local businesses. That is why today we are thrilled to announce the Pilot to Policy State Fund, which will resource local organizations on the ground in states to run campaigns that will modernize the tax code, advance a guaranteed income, and build power for economic justice. Founded with an initial investment of $1 million, our ambition is for the fund to replicate successes in more states by reaching more people who would benefit now and ultimately pave the way for a federal guaranteed income. So we will hear more from some of these amazing state leaders later today, as we'll be talking about some of the campaigns on the ground in a panel shortly. But next, it's time to hear from the experts. So please join me in welcoming the first ever Recipients Roundtable to the stage. For the first time, we are bringing recipients from across the country together for a conversation with Hope Wolensack of Georgia's In Her Hands project. Let's hear it for Hope.
Hi, everyone. Good morning again. I'm so excited to get the opportunity to facilitate this panel for the first time ever, guaranteed income recipients from across the country and experts from across the country to talk about the impact guaranteed income has on individuals, families, and communities. So here with us today, starting at the end, is Tomas Vargas from the Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration. Then we have, then next in, we have Ms. V. Tucker from Let's Go DMV. And then next in, we have Vernelle Cheneau of the Youth Force NOLA. And last but not least, we have last but not least, we have Kimberly McNair of Magnolia Mothers Trust in Jackson, Mississippi. And if y'all could help me out in wishing Kimberly a very happy birthday. Thank you for choosing to spend it with us. All right, well, let's get into it. One of my favorite parts about the In Her Hands program is making the phone calls where we tell people that they've been selected for the program. So if y'all could take us back to the moment you found out you were selected to receive guaranteed income, like where were you, how did you find out? And I know for some folks, they may have been a part in building those programs, so please throw that in as well. And maybe we can start with Tomas on the end and work our way down.
So where I was when I got the phone call was actually going to do my taxes at H&R Block. I actually think I told Sukhi that, can I call her back? Because that's my for sure money, so I was like, can I call you back? And I actually called her back. So I was at H&R doing my taxes.
I may have been at a meeting with the people from all of the groups that are involved in Let's Go DMV, and I'd heard that we actually, it was happening. Sorry. I was told that it was happening, and I was extremely excited about that, and more excited to be able to tell the co-workers that it was going to be going on.
What were some of the coworkers' reactions to hearing about this no strings attached cash?
I think most people felt that, okay, Dee, sure, stop pulling our leg. You know, it's not really, no one's giving you something for nothing. And, you know, it's not something for nothing. I had to, you know, let them know that that's not the case. But it's overdue, and it's, you know, it's really happening. So once they heard that, and we had to pull back a few times on the actual start date. So then, you know, of course, there was apprehensiveness about that. But oh, thank you. Yeah, after seeing that they'd actually gotten that first check, they were, you know, amazed and extremely happy.
Nice. Vernelle, yeah, what you tell us?
Honestly, I feel like I kind of spoke the whole guaranteed income thing into my own existence in the week prior to it. They were telling us about the Root of Cash transfer pilot, and I was like, this sounds like some UBI stuff. So I kept telling my family over and over again, I was like, I'm going to be getting $50 a week, And I was in the car with my family on our way, bringing my brother to his football practice. And then I told him, I said, I'm going to be getting free money. Then my brother, he says, you're going to get rich. And I said, not off of this, but yes. And so basically, you know, we had a happy dance. I brought him to Baskin Robbins, you know, share the victory. But yeah, that's where I was.
Overdue and very deserved.
Well, I was at home, and I believe Miss Aisha or Miss Sarah, one or the other, called me, and I was just ecstatic to hear that I was one of the recipients who would be receiving the money. It was a blessed moment.
Awesome. Yeah, that's such incredible moments that we know are so, people deserve this and more, and we wish it could be even more widespread. If you all could share us a little bit about how guaranteed income has impacted your life, your community, or your life and your family, especially how has it opened up time for you? How has it maybe changed how you think about time, and any other impacts that it might have had for you individually? And we can switch it up. Happy birthday, Kimberly. You can go first.
Yes, it definitely has made a big impact on me and my kids' lives. I'm just able to provide more. My kids, they always wanted to be in extracurricular activities, so I was able to get them on the football team and just motivate them more, because kids need that. You never know what they're going through, and them being able to be a part of that really makes them happy. So it changed our lives dramatically.
It has had such an impact on my life, because the unique thing about the Root of Cash transfer pilot was the fact that it was a guaranteed income that was given to high school students. So at the time I was receiving it, I was 18 years old. and working at Burger King. And it began to make me see the value of different things, such as my time, right? It began to make me think of money as a tool rather than just a resource. And it made me see the value of things such as like building your credit and things of that nature. I actually started my own LLC off of the money that I received from the university. So what I think is it's definitely something that not only is something that can be of great help to people with children and things of that nature, but it teaches you the value of this currency that we need in our day-to-day lives. And as I used to say when I was receiving that, you cannot learn how to use money if you don't have it.
Many of my coworkers, we work in the hospitality industry, and when COVID hit and we were suffering because we didn't know how we were going to take care of our bills, we didn't know if we were going to get back to work anytime soon, and if we went back to work, whether we'd look the same, whether we'd be able to make the same kind of income. So when we got the, we got our monies coming in on a regular basis, people, okay. Went off, sorry. Okay, sure. Anyway, so when we got our money, we just decided we were going to do some things that would, thank you. We decided we were going to do some things that would mean we would be financially secure. And so I'm one of the oldest people in my group, and certainly I'm the oldest person here on this panel. And we decided that we would find ways to make sure we never found ourselves in a position where if a pandemic came or if whatever happened, government shut down, because I work in a government location. And so if there was a government shutdown, pandemic, or whatever, we would have monies to take care of ourselves. Many of the people in my group were people who wondered whether they were going to lose their homes, and they fell into a bag of accepting what some of the tricks that people had for you. Like they'd say, okay, don't worry about paying your rent. You can pay it 3 months from now. But they didn't tell you 3 months from now you had to pay that 3 months worth of money, which you didn't have 1 month of. So how are you going to pay 3? And then if they extended it further, it would mean that you'd have even more to pay at the end of that period. So we started looking at things like we had meetings every week. We'd have the Zoom meetings, and we talk about our strengths, our weaknesses, our talents and skills, and what we could do to, make the most of those talents and skills so that we wouldn't find ourselves doing this same thing, this little guessing game. We were collecting unemployment, and we were like, okay, so what happens when unemployment ends? And I would say to my friends each week, unemployment is not forever. It is going to end. So we'd have to find ways to be prepared for that. So we worked towards those ends. We looked at all sorts of ventures that we could get into that would possibly make us money. One of the best ones, I think, is our food truck venture. We come from hospitality, we're from food service, and we felt like we could use those skills and, create this food truck business that should be a business that would be successful for us. We created cookbooks. We completed one. And we're moving towards the direction of doing others because we're groups of people from everywhere. We come from all over the world. And so the first cookbook we have is an Ethiopian cookbook. The Ethiopian and Eritrean community came together and we said, let's do this cookbook. And they jumped right on it. So it's been a good, this has not been just a, pandemic came and things were bad and everything was miserable. We created some things, so that's made it pretty good. So we're excited about where everything is going to go from here.
All right, so a few things that I learned from the SEED program was actually time and value. I didn't really have any time to value anything in my life because I was never around that raised. So what I got to experience being part of the SEED program was actually being there to be a father, to actually stand up to be a good husband, to be a good son. It gave me opportunities to look at myself in a different light instead of the darkness I was always used to. Things that I got to experience that I never experienced before. I'm 38 years old and I went camping for the first time at the beginning of this year with my children and my wife. And so So while doing the camping, now we've been going camping 8-9 times, bought a jet ski. We go out there and we are actually trying to do these new things because the experience of it was so exciting. And to see my kids lighten up and to see their face for the first time seeing that and actually sharing that with them, it was a big thing with me. Another thing that it gave me was a zero balance. Ain't nothing like having a zero balance when it comes to paying your bills. So what I did was I focused my first couple of checks towards making sure I had a zero balance. Then after that, I maintained it, and then I would go into a different venture, or I'd sit there and look for different opportunities to sit there and grow. And with the seed program, it gave me more confidence. I'm able to do things like this, speak in front of crowds. Before, 4 years ago, I would have never did it. I would have been scared. I would have ran away. Now, with the confidence that I have now, I love this. I enjoy the time that I get to spend, and my kids get to see it. A thing that I really see changing in my kids' life is they have confidence. They're looking towards their futures, and they're planning for their futures now, and they're only 10 and 11. And at that age, I just wanted to play or just run around or just do kid things. My kids do that, but now they have a different mindset to where they focus on their future. And that's one of the times or things that I get from Super Hard.
Sharing. Okay. Thank you all for sharing. And this next question is related, but how have you seen sort of the shift or impact in your family or community around these programs? So have you seen a shift either in your community or maybe more personally around your family, around these types of programs? What has it got people talking about? What has it got people saying? Please.
So the difference I've seen in my community and in myself is the fact that I'm part of my community now. So my neighbors and friends that are around me, like I said, I was never social before. So now to have that confidence and I have that type of communication with them, it builds a lot more trust. My kids, my son, he's running for 4th grade representative for school, student council, and he's a shoo-in. But it gave me the time to actually sit there and write with him his letter to even read like a regular resume, but he did his speech. And when we spoke about it, to see him be confident and say, "Well, Dad, you do it," and Mayor Tubbs does it, and he was like, "Then that's what I want to do." And to see that change with my kids, and even with my daughter's really focused on, she wants to go to the Marine Corps. So me and her bought some MREs, and now we eat MREs after school. I mean, but to see her so dedicated to it, it really moves me to sit there and dedicate myself to get more better at just anything. Before it was just I felt like I was stuck, and I'll never move on from where I was. And after the seed program came, I won't allow myself to ever look at myself like that again, because I know I can do better. And look at how much it changed. 100 city, we have pilots going on everywhere, and it's changing people's lives like us four and others. And that's what I like being about.
Is it on? Okay. Anyway, some of the things that have changed in my community is that hospitality workers, we were at a point where we were making good money, and people expected that to continue. And I work in, not a restaurant, but I work in a food and beverage department of a banquet facility, and actually a few banquet facilities. And one of the things is that people come from around the world to come to some of these events. And when the pandemic occurred and people couldn't, fly, or they did fly, they didn't feel comfortable, we had issues. We said, okay, we're not working at all. And, as I said, we were collecting unemployment. We didn't know how long that would last. And we didn't know what that would mean for us when it ended. But we knew we had to be proactive. We had to make some decisions about our lives, and we had to take control. So if we didn't take control, we knew what the outcome would be. And so we worked real hard at making sure, we were doing some of the right things, and as time went on, more of the right things. When our coworkers and other people in the industry started noticing that things were changing for us through the guaranteed basic income, they of course wanted to know how could they get in. We had people who wanted to do this, but in the beginning when we told them about what we were doing, they didn't believe it. They thought, no, it's never going to happen. It's just some conversation. It's not something that's going to really take place. So we shared with them that we believed and we could see that it was, and when it did happen, they said, how can I sign up? Well, it's not that easy, you know, so I'm glad that a program like this exists right now where people can see across the country and actually across the world. This is happening other places as well, and it can happen for them. So we're hoping in time that we can pull other people into joining guaranteed basic income and having some security for themselves.
The question is, how has it impacted me and my family, right?
Yeah, how has it impacted your family, or how have you seen this program impact your community?
Right. It has impacted me and my family tremendously, in the simple fact of, as I said earlier, it taught me to use money as a tool rather than just a resource. And in doing so, it increased my financial confidence as well as my financial knowledge, because when I had the money to use, right, I looked up ways in which I could use it to my advantage. And expanding my knowledge with my brother and sister, I live with them, and our fathers aren't really in our lives. My mother grew up poor. So I've noticed that no one else in my family knew about these things because none of them had a disposable income to even be able to think about these sorts of things. I'm 19 years old right now, and I make more money than my mother and have higher credit than her. And these are the types of things that I think about. And so I teach my brother and sister how to do the same things that I do. And now, as I've learned these things and I've rubbed these things off on them, I see them saying things like, when I turn 18, I want an LLC for my birthday, you know? and Ma, can I get some stocks for Christmas and things of that nature? And I'm like, get the Apple one. But it's just amazing for me because I can't bear to watch my brother and sister go through the same things that my mom, grandma, great-grandmother went through. You understand what I'm saying? And so these things we need to, like, and it goes to your point, we need to really think about how they affect not only the generation in the now, but the generations to come. Because I now have the knowledge that I need for not only myself, but my children. And then my children can pass that along to their grandchildren, and that's how we create generational wealth. The most important kind. And so, yeah, it's just helped me out tremendously.
Yes, so I feel like I just became a better voice for my community, and I had a lot of people reaching out to me also wanting to know how to get into the program, because I had an article posted and a lot of people seen it, and people from all over were reaching out to me, male and women. And I'm sorry I had to break it to the male that it was, you know, for women only. But yeah, so it was a great impact, and you know, it just made me a better person, and my energy just rubbed off on other people because they see that there's hope and there's really people out there that will help you.
Thank you all. Thank you. I know one thing I know, Vernelle, is that you've been spending some time on a podcast about guaranteed income. So if we could, let's hear the clip real quick.
How much work am I putting in for the amount that I'm being paid? It gives you a different perspective, because if you are in a situation where you're hopeless, then that's where people who have more money than you can take advantage of you very easily. And you now find it very hard to survive in the country that you live in. There's no guaranteed income for anyone. So if you acknowledge that money is needed for everyone, then everyone should have one.
Absolutely.
Incredible, so well put. What have you learned making this podcast, both about yourself, but also about the issue?
One thing that I've learned about myself while doing the podcast is one, I have a pretty nice sounding voice, but also, that there are people not only in my community, not only around the world, but like people like, who could be in my life that I don't even know care about so deeply about the things that I care about, right? And I also learned, my bad. I also learned that when it comes to issues like this, it's really the education, right, that is extremely important, because the people who could benefit from something like this greatly seldomly know about it, and those of them who know about it are convinced that it can't work because they're stuck in the ways of old, right? Get it by your bootstraps. You have to work for money because everybody works for money. But we fail to recognize that, one, money is not really something that exists, right? It's more of a social contract, so to speak, right? Where we all have the accepted notion that I can't eat, sleep, drink, or put clothes on my body unless I have money. These are the things that we accept in our day-to-day life, and these are the things that we have accepted for centuries. However, we let people go without. It's ludicrous to think that you need money to survive, yet we allow people to go without it. And it all ties back into what I said. If everybody needs money, everybody should have it. Plain and simple. There's nothing else that needs to be said, right? That's it.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I want to maybe open it up. I know that lots of other folks on this panel, whether have had opportunities where they've talked about guaranteed income, whether it was through another panel or another event or being featured in some type of publication. Maybe I'd love to ask you all the same question if you have some thoughts on it. Like, what have you learned about the issue and yourself sort of through some of those opportunities?
I have been a shop steward with my union for maybe 30 years, I guess. And thank you. And I was at a rally that the union had, and I met an organization, Restaurant Opportunity Center, and it was the one in DC, it's Rock DC. And the people that are associated with that are people that care about people. They care about ordinary, regular people. You don't have to be a celebrity. You don't have to be, some big business person. They just care about regular people. They want to see regular people survive and survive well. So I started working with Rock DC. I volunteered, and I kept thinking I must be crazy because I work 2 jobs, and I've got kids and grandkids. I don't have any time, but I had to do this. I knew this was for the generations coming, and in order to create change, to see change occur, you have to be willing to put in the time to make that change happen. So I worked with them. Through them, I met an organization called IF, and it's an organization that's, I don't say it correctly. It's a beautiful, beautiful group of people that are doing absolutely fantastic and wonderful things. And I was blessed to have run into these people and to be a part of what they're doing. And they helped put together the Let's Go DMV pilot. They hooked us up with all of these people who were just, the Amalgamated Bank and the grant makers, from various organizations. I was invited once after I got involved with them to meet with these philanthropists and find out what they were doing. And I was listening to this guy who was one of the keynote speakers. He had written a book about philanthropy. And he said people of color very rarely recognize that they can utilize philanthropy. They think it's for somebody else. And I surely did think it was for somebody else. I knew it wasn't for me. What are they gonna say if I go talk to them about my thoughts, my hopes, my dreams? Send me to the back of the room, tell me to sit down. So it didn't work that way. It was a beautiful, beautiful organization. If it's a foundation for radical possibility. And Han Lee, who's here today, and she's in charge of helping make all these wonderful things happen. And so I started working with her. I started working with Melanie Webb. I met her through IF. And she's one of the women that's going to be speaking later today. Melanie Webb is with an organization which is Mothers Outreach Network. And they're about, helping mothers and children, which needs to happen. And we need to see these things happen. We need to know that they can happen. And we need to have people like Melody who's doing the work. She's putting in the work. A couple of other people I just want to mention because it was just all these people doing all these things that made Let's Go DMV a reality. So some of the other people were Sophie Mayoshi and Candace Cunningham, and they're with Restaurant Opportunity Center of DC. And One Fair Wage is Saru Jarmu. And it's just these people decided that change was necessary and they were going to be part of that change. They talked and showed us shared different things with us that made me know, yes, these things can happen, will happen, but you got to do the work. You got to be willing to do the work. They were an example of that. So I decided I needed to be part of that as well. And every time I have an opportunity, I talk to my coworkers, I talk to my neighbors, I talk to just regular folks I meet anytime I meet them, and I'm sharing with them that there are these organizations that exist that are doing the things that are necessary to change our lives. So we have to be willing to put in the work and make those things happen.
Yeah, sort of as you've been, in some ways, had various opportunities or experiences talking about guaranteed income, sort of if you wanted to share any reflections on that. I know you've spoken on a couple panels that I've had the honor to attend. So if you've, similar to the podcast, sort of, how have those sort of experiences, what have maybe you learned about the issue or yourself through some of those experiences?
So with the experiences that I went through, I got to learn a lot about myself. I got to learn that I wasn't as unable to learn as what I thought I was. I thought I was based on what I knew was all I knew, and I couldn't learn anymore. Given the opportunity to speak and do things like this and these type of events really gave me more of a self-confidence. Not only do I have self-confidence, but I have reassurance in myself. I don't sit there and doubt myself as much. So the opportunity to speak with, and now work with MGI. I pulled from being the first recipient to now I work with MGI. So just really it's just given the strength to make those choices or make that change, because where I was really feared. I really feared even trying anything that changed. I was so used to just having what I had and just leaving it as what it was and never really wanting anything else until the SEED program came out. And then that's when like the big narrative came where it was like we were supposed to spend our money on whatever random yachts or something. I heard yachts earlier. Yeah. I heard that and I really took offense to it because I was hearing that from a person that never met me and doesn't know my struggles and don't know what I'm willing to do and what kind of fight I'm willing to put up. So the opportunity of just being here, that's the thing that changed me, was just being given an opportunity.
So I'd love to transition into like what you want to tell people listening who are fighting to get more cash in people's pockets. What would you want to instill? What lessons and expertise would you want to instill in the folks in this room who are listening about getting more cash in people's pockets? And what's at stake if we don't?
My kids' future. That's how I look at it. First, I would like to thank everybody that put in that fight and everybody that continues to put in that fight. One of the biggest changes, like I said, is knowing that my kids have confidence in themselves and they're looking towards their future. Like I said, the way I was raised, I don't think I would have instilled that in them, or I would have had the opportunity to instill that in them, because I would have never been looking towards that kind of path for them. And to know that they're doing it on their own, that's the biggest thing that I enjoy, and that brings me life. Seeing my kids, my best invention, be their best, I mean, that's the biggest thing that I get from this, and I thank you guys all again for doing the fight and fighting for what you guys are fighting for.
I would like to say thank you all for your tremendous work. First off, everybody who works towards this, you're working towards a cause that is simply too powerful to ignore. I hope you understand that this is the modern civil rights movement happening here. Keep doing it. As V said, a dream without work is, I mean, what's it called again? How does saying go again? You know how to say it.
How we saying
How's it go? A goal without a plan is a dream.
No, a dream without a goal without any action is only a dream. So a goal without any action is only a dream.
Sorry, you know, I get a little confused with it. But a goal without any action is only a dream. So keep taking action, and eventually your goals will come true. But don't become complacent and stagnant, because if you do, then they just remain dreams. And that's all.
And yes, I would like to start by saying thanks to everyone who's involved, and just keep fighting, because the fight is definitely worth it. And it's for a good cause, and you're impacting a lot of lives. There's people out here who are on the edge, and you're giving families hope again.
The gentleman who spoke this morning and talked about all of the things that could be, and should be, and how, when we think about the fact that most ordinary, everyday people believe that they don't have a shot at the kind of life they really want. When we think, okay, yeah, I'd like to have this, I'd like to have that, but it's not going to happen to me. I'm not one of those people that's going to see that. Oftentimes we think like that, but we've got to learn how to throw that thought out the window. Just, get rid of that thought. You do the work, you have a dream, you want to make something happen. Research it, figure out what it takes to make that happen. Do the work, be willing to do it. And then, you have as much opportunity, as much chance as anyone else at being successful, at seeing your dreams come true. Thank you. Thank everybody.
And I'd love to just open it up. If y'all have any just closing thoughts, things that we didn't touch on that you feel like are really important, would love to just open it up for a couple minutes just for any final reflections.
Okay. One, for anybody who is asking questions as to the point that he made, what are people going to spend the money on? The same things that they spend their paychecks on, the same things that everybody spends money on. I have a friend who, 2 days ago, he spent $5,000 to put grass on his back lawn. Do you feel like that's squandering money? So if somebody else needs $500 a month and they're already struggling to take care of their 3 children with their 3 jobs, I think that's pretty reasonable. That's all.
Well, I think I've said a lot, so I was passing the mic around and letting everybody say what, they felt they needed to say. But of course, when I told you guys about the food truck idea, there were people saying, oh, you can't do that, but, it's just a dream. It costs a lot of money. You got that kind of money? And, most of us had to say, no, we really don't. Even with the guaranteed income that we're receiving and we're happy to receive, I don't know about where everybody lives, but I live in the DMV. It's pretty expensive to live in the DMV. I don't live there because it's expensive. I don't live in a big grand place or any of that kind of thing. But, nonetheless, your average person probably is spending well over $1,000 for rent to live in the DMV. And then you have your gas, your electric, your water. You've got your food. You've got your transportation. Uber just went up ridiculously high. But anyway, you know, and I take Uber to work every day and come back with it. So like I easily can spend $40 a day on an Uber. And I'm thinking, well, what else could I do with that $40? So I'm looking at how I can find ways, and I'm so, so grateful for the people that I'm affiliated with, that I'm, you know, dealing with it through, you know, this guaranteed basic income program. Let's go, DMV. You know, I'm so happy with all the people I've met, because those people are telling us that we've got ideas. What makes my idea a good idea or a bad idea? You know, and I'm thinking we can take those ideas we have, and we can take this extra money we have. We can take a little bit of it. We can skim a little bit off the top there and take that money and use it for that investment that'll make our dreams realities. So I thank all of you all for being here, because I know that you could be doing something else with your time. You're here, and I appreciate the fact that you're here. And I'm going to share everything I've learned here with all the people back home. Let them know that there are people throughout the country that do care, that want to see all of us do well. You don't want to see your neighbors suffering and struggling and not being able to make it. So, you know, the fact that you came here shows that you actually care about other human beings. So, you know, I'm just letting them know we've got to care too. We've got to care about ourselves. We've got to care about our fellow man. We've got to help make these things happen that need to happen. No one in this country needs to be homeless. No one in this country needs to be hungry. No one in this country needs to suffer from not having clothes to wear when the weather's cold. You know, we need to do what we can to be helpful to each other. Thank you.
Any final closing thoughts?
I don't have any.
That's okay. Let's give it up for this amazing panel. Thank you all so much for sharing these gems with us. Y'all are incredible. Thank you all so much for sharing these gems with us, these lessons that we'll all be carrying forward. It is so appreciated. And I'd love to, in just a couple years, we've just launched the In Her Hands program here in Georgia, across the Old Fourth Ward, Southwest Georgia, in College Park. And so I look forward to having similar conversations in the coming months with some of the folks who both participated in the design of In Her Hands and are in the In Her Hands program. So thank you all. And with that, we wanted to take a quick second to talk a little bit about sort of the history here in Georgia related to guaranteed income, and a bit of the arc of the work that happens on the ground with everyday people that has led us to even be in this space. So in coalition with ESP, the Georgia Resilience and Opportunity Fund, recently this year created a video documenting some of the work around guaranteed income. It's a sliver, but a sliver of the work around guaranteed income, and in particular focusing on the Old Fourth Ward neighborhood of Atlanta, which you all who may not be familiar is just about half a mile from here. It's in an adjacent neighborhood, and it's the birthplace of Dr. Martin Luther King, as I believe and it's where he and Coretta are buried, home to the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, and of course, many people have mentioned this today, but just wanted to honor that legacy that we are standing in and very proximate to at this time. So if we could cue that video, thank you so much.
A city of Olympic proportions, angelic troublemakers, born of sharecroppers and Magnolia, crafted meccas out the smoldering ruins of Terminus by fighting for all of us. Every generation has lifted this place from ruin, passing down the secrets of survival from palm to sacred palm, defying whatever a plantation was supposed to undo in us, building a new world by holding a mirror to the old one. We know what happened to the bustling Old Fourth Ward, where black industry used to line Auburn Avenue like gold. We were forced out, gutted by quiet legislation and complicit politicians. Our mothers pushed over county lines or over police for trying to feed us, and folks want this city to return to dust, want coffee shops instead of community centers, brunch spots instead of bus stops. Nah, we fight back, we fund back. The call to arms like percussion at the corners of Old Fourth Ward. There, a black woman stands in the street and makes a blueprint from the hands of Coretta, raised over the skyline to guide us as we rise, not as a preacher's wife, but a warrior in her own right. There comes a time when time itself is ready for change. Are you ready? And ain't it time? Time to recognize Johnny Tillman's toil was not in vain. She built black welfare, a change agent, taught us to demand everything we need, not just to survive, but to thrive. Welfare mothers, mamas determined that we fare well. What a gift. Yes, our history is a black woman's vision. Our community is a call to action. Atlanta, the birthplace of our martyrs, is fertile ground for our futures. They call this a city too busy to hate, but this place is simply a city too powerful to break. A culture bred from rebellious sweat, from the rioters to the voters to the wisdom keepers. Our hands pour into black women's hands, and black women's hands, they pour into us. Together, a new world, no strings attached, right there in the palm of her hand, in her hand.
Thank you to our recipients, and thank you to Hope for moderating that conversation. Those of you who know me, you often hear me say that we must change the narrative by changing the narrator. And what we just saw was that in action. The recipients told us themselves what they used the resources for. And what I really saw show up was joy. And joy is currency. And they talked about legacy and what these resources mean for them and their families. And I think it was Kimberly who said she was able to breathe a little lighter. And that's currency, that's legacy, that's the ability to dream. And that's really what we should all be challenged, and that should be our charge when people ask us, what is the money spent on? We should reframe that. And we should offer the counter narrative. So thank you again to the recipients, and thank you to Hope for moderating that conversation. And as we talk about legacy and dreaming, it is my esteemed pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Bernice King, in conversation with Mayor Tubbs. Dr. Bernice King is a global thought leader, a strategist, a solutionist, an orator, a peace advocate, and CEO of the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change, which was founded by her mother as the official living legacy to the life and work of her father. In this position, Dr. King continues to advance her parents' legacy of nonviolent social change through policy, advocacy, research, as well as education and training through the philosophy of nonviolence. Please welcome to our stage Dr. Bernice King in conversation with Mayor Tubbs.
Get your pictures. We talking to legacy. Get the shoes. Oh, make sure y'all get the shoes. Look at the shoes. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Dr. King.
And I didn't spend $5,000.
You didn't? Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Not wasting money up here. And I just want to ground us a little bit to give you some context. So in the audience, we have sort of advocates, community members, foundation heads, elected officials, mayors, county supervisors, who have all dedicated themselves to this idea of how do you make guaranteed income a reality. And we've talked about sort of the movement moving forward, but we wanted this conversation to also ground us in like the past. Like this isn't new, this isn't novel. And so I want to start our conversation, Dr. King, with can you share with us in terms of your family's legacy, your father's legacy, but also your mother's, in terms of guaranteed income, dignity? Like how was that part of the Kingian legacy? And what does it mean for you to see 50 plus years later so much energy around this simple concept your family was talking about decades ago?
Yeah, let me first thank you for taking up this cause. You know, I DM'd you a few years ago when you started on this path. And I congratulated you and thank you for doing that, because there's so much of my father's work that has been left by the wayside, especially on the economic side. And so I'm deeply appreciative of what you're doing and what many of you mayors, superintendents are doing across this nation. You know, how did he get there? You know, obviously, my father grew up witnessing a lot of economic inequities as a child here in Atlanta, Georgia, and noticed some differences even when he went to the north to work in the tobacco fields. So all of this began to stir up from him, you know, issues around racism, poverty, and ultimately, as we know, his triple evils with militarism. And just before the movement, he wrote a letter to my mom and talked about the twins, the inseparable twins of racial and economic injustice. So even before the movement started, this was all seeded in him, obviously in my mother as well, growing up in rural Alabama, in a town called Heiberger. If you blink, you'll miss it, literally. And so she started claiming Marion, Alabama, because where she was born, the home was destroyed, and then my grandfather built their next home after my mother had graduated from the Lincoln School in Marion, Alabama, built a home in Marion. But if we fast forward, as we know, much of the early parts of the movement were focused on the segregation laws in the South. And most people think my father evolved to this whole issue around economics. And what I explained to people is he understood that we had to address some of these segregation issues if we even were going to build an inclusive economy. Because what good is it to be able to have businesses that are just confined in the Black community as a Black person, when you want to be able to do business anywhere as a Black business, and receive patronage from all communities. And so he understood about addressing that, and then turned his attention economically to the north and started looking at Chicago, as we know, open housing, et cetera. But really what pushed him over the edge was when Johnson called for the war on poverty, and yet you had this Vietnam War taking place. And it was deeply troubling for my father, because not only was he looking at the physical devastation of what he felt was an unjust war, but also the economic devastation, in particular at that time for Black citizens. And so he felt like we have got to figure out a way to address this. And of course, he was a scholar, did a lot of reading, and he knew about all of the discussions around guaranteed income. It wasn't anything that he, came up with himself, because it was widely being discussed by the likes of the one that he referred to mostly is John Kenneth Galbraith. And in studying him, he came across the fact that if we just spent about $20 billion, we could address poverty head on, and for him, he saw it as the answer, that all these other issues that we tie into poverty, whether you're talking about housing, education, et cetera, even if you address those, you still won't directly deal with poverty. Real issue is about money. It's about income. It's about full employment, and really a livable wage. And so he wrote about it in his book, Where Do We Go From Here, in particular, and discussed it even in his last speech at the SCLC convention in 1967. And it was fascinating for me to even read it. But I'll just stop there. But that's conceivably how he developed it. And for him, it was like, wait a minute. We're spending all this all these financial resources on a war, destroying lives in so many different ways, and the cost of that war, which was detracting from the war on poverty. So I think it was somewhere around $55 million with the war and all of the exploration that we were doing related to the moon. And he felt like, wow, if we only spent 20 billion, excuse me, not million, 20 billion versus 55 billion, we could alleviate these issues around poverty. And that's what he called for. That's why he said a guaranteed income. And there are details about that, of course. Many of you may know it. You know, for him, it was about pegging it to the median income, but not the low side of that median income. And not just that, ensuring that it was dynamic and not static, that it would, rise as, inflation rose. And so, that was really intriguing for me. But as you know, the biggest issue we have today is the will. The resources are here. So we have to figure out how to develop the will in people.
Wow. You gave us a lot, so I'm gonna give you a break and kind of summarize some of the nuggets you dropped, because I think they're gonna be the guide for the rest of our time together. I appreciated particularly the call out in terms of priorities. Mm-hmm. When you juxtapose 55 billion with 22 billion and saying, so 20, how do we build the will, which is gonna be my next question. But I also wanna sort of I love the fact you called out that the fight for civil rights or human rights was always an economic fight. It was always about full inclusion into the democracy, but also into the economic systems, and how those things were never separate or different movements or even different trains of thought, that they were always linked and always sort of how your family and others thought of the movement. And we have these folks here who have the will, 250 plus people who have the will. And I guess this is part of your work, your family's work, but we'd love to hear your thoughts around, particularly in this moment, when we have just assaults on reproductive rights, voting rights, LGBT rights, like just all rights are under attack. Like, how do we build the will, A, and then B, particularly for folks, because the folks in the room are tired. They've been working. Like, how do we take care of ourselves while building the will to do something that's necessary, but hasn't been done yet because there's a lot of blocks there?
Ooh, that's loaded. The reality is, in the freedom struggle, it never ends, as my mother said. Struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. We all have to pace ourselves in this process. But the biggest thing is that I think is different today than when my father was in leadership, is that he had a way of keeping a critical mass of people together on a day-to-day basis, focused strategically on attacking things systemically or systematically. And we don't do that today, so I think it not that they weren't tired, because they were very tired. I mean, this is tiring work. Let's just be real. When my father's autopsy was done, he had the heart of a 75-year-old. So he was 39. So it's tiring work. I don't think that's ever not going to happen, but each one of us has to decide, how we're going to do our self-care in this process, and not feel guilty about it. But what helps is when I think this is what helped people back then, they knew they had a leadership structure that kept things moving. So if I know in my absence, you all are still, working together collectively, cohesively, in a coordinated fashion, it makes it easier to take that time away to deal with self, even spiritual self, because we have to understand that, in the philosophy of nonviolence, the sixth principle reminds us, and this is very hard for people to grasp, that the universe is on the side of justice. Now, it's not just automatic. It means that a collection of us have to line up with that, so the energy for justice will continue to reveal itself in our earth. And so when you understand that, you put your belief in that, you put your faith or trust in that, and it gives you a little bit of ease in your heart. That's what helps me. You know,
Wait, can you say that again? That felt so good. When you said, and I want to make sure I got it. You talked about the universe bends towards justice, but to manifest that energy, we have to be together. Is that?
There has to be a collective, you know, there has to be a collective, a critical mass committed to bringing that to bear, okay? But where the ease comes is really aligning with it and accepting that, you know. And for me, the way I accept it is I just look at the history. There's too much in history that proves to us that we triumph over evil and injustice. We wouldn't be where we are today and doing I wouldn't be sitting in this room with so many white people. Not in Atlanta, even in Atlanta. You know what I'm saying? So there's enough there for me to hold on to. That's why you don't discard history or discredit it, because there's a tendency in our arrogance to feel like we are the chosen ones, the chosen generation. But the reality is there were those before us that had, you know, the fortitude and the strength and the foresight and the faith, you know, and the courage to push through and overcome these things and have a sense of ingenuity in the process. So that's why we're here. So we took the baton for them. We need to draw our strength from them. We need to extract the lessons. That's why I encourage people, and this is somewhat of a selfish plug, but it's not a selfish plug, because in 1964, when my father delivered his Nobel Peace Prize lecture, he talked about the urgency and the immediate need for the philosophy and strategy of nonviolence to be seriously experimented with. Let me see, I want to get it right. He said that the philosophy and strategy immediately become a subject of study and serious experimentation in every field of human conflict, by no means excluding relationships between nations. And so we now have an opportunity to truly study nonviolence and how it worked holistically through time and history, going back, as we know, to the most familiar, Mahatma Gandhi, but fast forwarding to Dr. King. And the work that we do at the King Center, we just literally launched in January an online experience for people to learn it, so that you can do it at your own self-pace. You can go back and, you know, ask critical questions, you can sit with it, you can reflect, and engage with it. It's very interactive, and so I just want to encourage the people in this room, because it's a nonviolent social change approach. I believe selfishly that we will not get to the beloved community, we will not get to a just, humane, equitable, peaceful world, but through the nonviolence way. And I'm a little selfish in it, because I believe what my father gave us was a gift. You know, he gave us not just tactics, he gave us a philosophy, a foundation, a love-centered way of attacking these evils, so that we do not become the evil when we're trying to correct the evil. Because there's a danger when you're correcting something that has been so excruciating and painful and oppressive. There's a danger in our emotion in fashioning a solution that we will do the same thing to another group of people. So we have to be very careful in the process. I don't know, I probably got off track, but I just was led in that direction.
No.
Oh, so anyway, go to thekingcenter.org. I want to say that, though. Please.
Oh, I was going to give you a law. I was going to set that up for you.
Look for the Nonviolence 365 online, for real, seriously.
No, I was going to set it up. That's my next question. I was going to say, well, Dr. King, where can we go? But
I wanted to say, because you asked my question, how do we do this? That's how we do it. We gotta study the approach, because we got to use our energy more strategically. you know, and sometimes, unfortunately, as much as we have people who are advocates for social change in so many different arenas, and I'm probably moving to other questions or whatever. I'm sure you'll figure it out and ask me something else. But anyway.
If you let me, I got you. If you let me.
As long, you know, the reality is we've got to find a way to come out of our silos. You know, I've been dealing with something for a long time, and I'm still waiting for just a clearer picture of it. I'm a minister in the Christian faith. I'm not getting ready to evangelize, so if you're part of another religion, don't worry about that because I'm very sensitive to that. But there's a scripture in Nehemiah that is so critical about rebuilding these walls. I mean, the devastation and destruction. And there's a particular one that has intrigued me and not troubled me, but has me a little bit, on edge saying, okay, God, keep helping me to see what it is in this that people can understand. But what I've gotten is Nehemiah pulled all the leaders and the people together. And he said, look, this work that we're dealing with is extensive. Anybody agree? It's very extensive. And we're widely separated on the wall. Does anybody agree with that? I mean, we're in our different pockets in areas, addressing, in particular, this group, issues around poverty and the guaranteed income. And so we're widely spread doing it. And then he says, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, come hither, come to this particular spot and place. I'm just going to declare today is that spot. This moment is that spot. Come to that place and our God will fight for us. Our collective energy, if we stay focused, connected, and coordinated, and not give up, the power of the universe will meet us in it. We don't know the moment. Rosa Parks didn't know that she was going to set a movement off. I mean, when Harriet Tubman was freeing slaves, she didn't know how far that was going to go, and so that's what gives you the greater resolve, because you know that you're aligned with something that's right and just, and that there's going to be this energy that meets me in it. And it may not solve everything, but if you can just glimpse at the victories, no matter how small you may think they are, these individuals that were sitting here today, that's part of the victory. Their testimonies and their stories, that's part of the victory. And we have to capture those things. We have to bottle those things. And we have to package those things. And we got to distribute them throughout this country. Because there are too many people that don't know what's happening in this room. It's catching on. But there's so many other people that need to know about it, the data that you have. When I read about, when you started your pilot, and I read about the fact that the majority of the people, if not all, spent their money on the right things, on needs. People need to understand that, because the number one attack is, we're just giving a handout. No, we're giving a hand up. You see what I'm saying? We're helping to create some of this equity that's missing in our society. But we got to show it to some people for it to make sense. And so there's a big job in doing this, where there has to be a massive marketing campaign, and distribution through all channels and mediums of communication in this nation. Because more and more people need to join this movement, and I'm not just talking about elected officials. I appreciate that you all started this, but we've got to get it codified in federal law, that this is a part of. When Daddy spoke about it, he was talking about not something temporary. He was talking about something permanent, because the reality is our world economy, our national economy, it's going to have its, ups and downs. There's going to be market dislocations, and, with the emergence of technology, in some ways the threat of technology, and we need to incorporate that into our thinking because we're all fascinated with this here and what it can do, and we get fascinated when we see, Martin Luther King, or, I'm getting ready to participate Friday in International Day of Nonviolence at the UN, and there's going to be a hologram of Gandhi. That stuff is fascinating, and I'm not, casting any aspersions against that, but the reality is that we have to make sure that we put and continue to keep the thought of people at the forefront so that we don't displace humanity. The world wasn't created for robots. Hello? All of these things are just supposed to be tools. But if we don't keep our priorities and our values, that's why he called for a revolution of values. If we don't keep that in order, and make sure that we value humanity, humankind, people, individuals, breathing, living beings, then we will take these instruments, as he said, and destroy ourselves in the misuse of them. And we're dangerously close to misusing technology. It is going to overtake our world. Even, the one who participates in it, the technology prophet, Elon Musk, has indicated that. Not that he said he wants that to happen, but these are realities we are faced with. So something has to happen to this universe, and this, what you are doing, is keeping the focus around humanity and people. That's important. You know what I'm saying? It's important. Compassion. This is about compassion. This is about the fact that you're my sister, you're my brother, we're part of a family. And all these wonderful things are at our behest, and we have all these wonderful opportunities, and we've got to figure out a way to make it work for everybody so that the quality of life is excellent for everybody. Everybody's not going to be a millionaire, but they have everything they need plus a little more. I know you all have envisioned a world like that, right? I have. That's why I work toward it. That's what keeps me going, the vision. Because without the vision, we perish in our minds and our thoughts, in our day-to-day living. And so I have to keep that vision before me and keep pushing toward it every day. I wake up with that, This is not about me. It's not about you. It starts with me, but it's not about me. It's really about having an other-centered perspective and recognizing and being other-centered. I'm not diminishing myself. I'm elevating myself, because you can't even be other-centered without caring for self in an appropriate way. But if your life is just about, your own circle, it's a hollow life, and that's what we're challenged with. There's a lot of self-centeredness today. But thank you all for caring. Thank you for having compassion. And thank you for the work that you're doing. It's awesome, really. And it's just the beginning. Yeah.
Then we got time for one more question. But before we do the question, I just want to make sure we also take a time to reflect on what you just shared, because I think it was both powerful and prophetic. You talked about sort of the book of Nehemiah and sort of when they were on the wall, and when you hear the trumpet, let's all come together. You said this could be that moment for us today. And I just want to underline that, because that was powerful to me. But what I also appreciate about the Nehemiah story, and it's my favorite scripture, and I don't read the Bible like you, but when I read it, it's the one I read. And he says, the people rebuilt the wall because they had a mind to work. Yes. And this idea of being, and you talked about being focused and disciplined and strategic, and having some tactics. Because I think oftentimes we think we have to reinvent the wheel, or that this work is disconnected, but you can't be for guaranteed income and not be against nonviolence. So you gave us some homework in terms of going to the kingcenter.org and signing up for that Nonviolence 360 class, which I will do. To make
65.
365, yes.
That means every day of the week.
I gotta take some days. You said self-care, I gotta take some days off. That's some vacation
Oh,
days.
gotcha. That's good.
So that, and then you also talked about how, particularly at this inflection point in human history, when there's real threats about displacement, like robots, whatever, if we don't fix the here and now, which is what guaranteed income is about, if we don't get to the point where we understand that you have dignity because you're a person,
Yes.
you ain't gotta do nothing, you ain't gotta produce nothing, just because you're a human, you have dignity. If we don't get that right, the next 100 years will be very, very scary. So I want to thank you for that. And the last question, it's not even a question. It's gonna be it's a provocation, because I think sort of we think about your father being at the mountaintop and sort of seeing the promised land, and you talked about it a little bit in terms of how you wake up every day and you see a world where everyone has just enough and a little more, which I love. Like not just enough, but a little bit more. So could you describe that world, for your vision? Like, what does our country look like with a guaranteed income? Like, what would America look like if when the fruit of our labors come to fruition?
Well, the number one thing that people are concerned about across the nation is crime and violence. That's real. I don't care what race you are, what class you are. You're concerned about it. And when we have a world where people have what they need, plus, that kind of violence and crime begins to diminish and become insignificant. It's under control. It's under wraps. That's the first thing. So we need this as a solution for that. That's the first thing. And then it does something to people. You know, when you have what you need and can make decisions without feeling like you're begging or you're borrowing or robbing Peter to pay Paul, you feel better about yourself. And when you feel better about yourself, your ability to be productive is greater. So we have more productive workers. That's beneficial for corporations. You know, people are stressed economically. And, you know, with all of these fluctuations and I'd say manipulations in our market, we have to insert something like this. We have no choice. I was telling somebody recently, as much as we're trying to address the issue around our unsheltered brothers and sisters, some of this is going to require us having that compassionate, giving heart and understanding, no matter how many services we wrap around, which we should do, because there are those that can be rehabilitated. There's a great percentage of them that will never be able to participate again in society because we let it go too long. That's why this now is important, because if we don't do this now, then that population is going to grow even greater. And the exorbitant level of mental health is going to be out the roof, because it's abnormal to have to live in the circumstances that they live in. Very abnormal. That's not human. That's not humane. Let me say that. And so I can just imagine if we do this right, even that becomes less of an eyesore on our nation. You know, we won't even be talking about homelessness, because when people's stress levels, you know, are freed up, they're more innovative. You know, we think we're innovative now. Oof. Can you imagine having 80% of the people, like, stress levels so low? Whew. Everything that we're looking at saying, how do we fix, how do we solve, how do we address? We'll come up with these solutions and we'll be so happy to work with each other together on them. That's the world that that I want to see, and that we're not trying to, exploit and grab somebody else's resources. We're respecting not only the dignity of work, but also the dignity of community and placement. And we're not, eyeing certain communities to gentrify. We're trying to figure out how to enrich, those communities, how to empower and strengthen, those communities. The fear, the greatest thing that we have to address today is fear. And it's widespread in all classes. The reason we have some of these issues is because of fear. I can't give the details, but I'm going to explain it this way. I was talking to two individuals, and it was a conversation about an exchange of positioning, which means an exchange of power. Someone moves into one place, another person moves out of a place. So if you're in a place of power, and another person wants to move into that place of power, sometimes it can feel a little threatening. You know what I mean? And so I was in the conversation with these individuals, and I asked the person in the position of when I say power, I'm tying this directly to position now, but you can, look at it in other ways too. I just finally said, "What are you afraid of?" And that broke the person down, and they shared what they were afraid of, so that the other person could hear it and understand it and consider, how do we do this in a way that it's a win-win pathway for both parties? And so, to me, what the spirit of the guaranteed income does, because even to get to the mindset of doing this means you've gotten to a place where you understand that we are a collective family, that you're willing to see some give, and take some sacrifice. When you inject that more into society, then we can help to bring down the fear level. And so to me, that's the world that I want to live in, where we're, and so that people are not, exploiting, oppressing, and destroying communities and everything else, and countries, like what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. So that's it. And I'm going to say to all of us in this process, before my daddy, well, I didn't say that right. The night that he gave a speech, perhaps he knew it was his last night, the way it seems from looking at it. But the night he gave that speech, he said two simple things to the crowd, and I think it applies to us today. He said, "Don't stop here in Memphis if something were to happen to him." I don't know what that is. There's always something in the universe that wants to disrupt and stop good. Okay? Don't let it. Don't let it cause you to dissipate, disintegrate, and separate. And that's when the second part where he said, stick together. Stay together. Whatever you do, stay together in this process. Keep it up until you get to the vision and the outcome that you're seeking. Please don't quit. I know it's hard. I know it's tiring. But remember those that came before you. They didn't quit. They kept moving. They kept moving. That 382 days was a long time to stay off of buses. But they were determined, not until I see a change. So you say that to yourself, not until I see a change. I can't quit.